What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the corner where we talk about fantasy hoops, bad lineup decisions, and everything else in between when it comes to the NBA basketball. Today's video, we are going to be talking about sleepers and potential breakout players for this year's upcoming NBA season. First off, we have Keyonte George / Isaiah Collier. The Utah Jazz are one of those sneaky teams that might surprise people this season. They're young, talented, and full of players who can easily outperform where they're being drafted in fantasy basketball drafts. Right now, the general consensus is that Keyonte George is the guy to watch when it comes to the Jazz. Most fantasy projections expect a breakout year from him, and he's currently being drafted around the mid-50s in most formats, and that's a pretty steep price tag for a player who is incredibly talented, but still has a few question marks around his role on the Jazz. And that's exactly where I think fantasy managers might be overvaluing him just a bit. See, George isn't currently the starting point guard in Utah. That job looks like it's going to be Isaiah Collier, who's heading into his sophomore year and brings in a much safer floor compared to Keyonte George. Now, Collier is not as flashy as George, but he's going to set the consistent minutes and touches that fantasy owners honestly crave when it comes to fantasy basketball. He's expected to take over the role that Colin Sexton had left last season, and if that's true, his production could quietly take a major jump compared to last year. To close out last season, Collier averaged about 6.7 assists per game over his final 10 games of the year, and he really started to settle into that role. With another year of experience and better chemistry with Utah's new younger core, I wouldn't be shocked to see that number climb to around 8 to 8.5 assists per game this year. And that's not just because of individual improvement. The Jazz roster itself sets him up for success, with Walker Kessler developing as a reliable rim runner and Kyle Filipowski adding floor spacing and score versatility. Collier's assist number should naturally rise as he starts to play more with his core. He's surrounded by players who finish well and can stretch defenses, which means more opportunities for him to rack up easy dimes. So while everyone's focused on Keyonte George, and again, he's an absolutely talented player with huge upside, don't overlook Isaiah Collier as a high value sleeper pick in your fantasy drafts. He may not come with the same hype, but his combination of playing time, opportunity, and skill could honestly make him one of the best late round steals in this draft. In short, if you're hunting for value in the middle or late rounds, keep your eye on Isaiah Collier. Sometimes the best fantasy moves are not about chasing the upside only, they're also about recognizing who's quietly stepping into that perfect role. And this next sleeper, honestly, I feel like is going to be a no-brainer. It's probably one of the easiest decisions that I've ever made in my life, and that is going to be Peyton Pritchard. With Jason Tatum expected to miss most of the season, if not pretty much all of it, with his Achilles tear, the Celtics are going to have a lot of shots and offensive opportunities up for grabs this year. And one player who could quietly benefit from all of that is Peyton Pritchard. Now, I'm not going to say he's suddenly going to be a fantasy superstar or anything crazy like that, but when you look at the Celtics depth chart, there's a clear path for him to see more minutes and touches. Pritchard's not going to lead your team in scoring, but he's the kind of player who can fill the box score in every single counting stat. A few rebounds here, some assists there, and that steady production has real value, especially when you can get him late in drafts. Last season, Pritchard averaged about 3.5 assists per game, and I think that number is going to tick up this year. With Tatum out and the Celtics needing more playmaking and from the guard spot, I could easily see him averaging around 4 assists per game this year, maybe even more during stretches when the offense runs through him. And there will be nights when he looks absolutely incredible. Those random games where he goes off for about like double-digit assists and knocks down a handful of threes and suddenly looks like a fantasy cheat code. But most of the time, you're drafting him for his stability. He's not going to blow you away with 30 to 40 point games every night, but he's also not going to kill your roster either. He's the kind of player you want at the end of your bench, someone you can plug in when you need counting stats without worrying about a complete dud. Now, I wouldn't reach for him early. He's not a round 7 or even a round 8 kind of guy in my opinion, but if you're drafting in the later rounds like 10, 11, or 12, or you're in a super deep league with 12 to 14 players where every rotation player does matter, Pritchard is the perfect stash candidate. And the best part is, if another injury hits the Celtics rotation, his role could easily expand overnight. More ball handling, more usage, and more fantasy value. For category leagues, he is definitely a must roster player. For points leagues, if he's there on the waiver wire, he could be a flyer. Now, this next guy, last year he was a rookie, and I do struggle with saying his name, so I'm gonna try. And that is Matas Buzelis. And honestly, he had some very flashy moments last year, but this year I think he takes that next step up. I think the Chicago Bulls are easily one of the most interesting teams in the NBA this season. After a really up and down year last year, they found themselves in somewhat of a rebuild. But honestly, this is a really fun one. It's full of young, developing talent. Between Josh Giddey, Kobe White, and Mataz Bazulis, Chicago has a young core that could honestly surprise a lot of people. And out of that group, the player I think that could make one of the biggest sleeps this year is Bazulis. Last season, he only averaged 8.6 points and 3.5 rebounds per game, but you could already see flashes of what he can become with confident shot making, good feel in transition, and even ability to fit within the team's offense instead of forcing shots. With another offseason to develop in a bigger role on a roster that's clearly looking toward the future, those numbers should rise a lot this year. I can see Bazulis comfortably averaging around 13 to 14 points a game and 5 boards a night this year. That may not sound like a massive jump, but for a second-year player on a team trying to climb out of the bottom of the East, it's the kind of production that can make a real difference in that climb, both for the Bulls and for fantasy managers looking for upside. The key is that Chicago will have to rely on him more as the season goes on, and as Giddey and White handle the playmaking load, Bazulis will get plenty of catch and shoot looks, and his length gives him rebounding upside from the wing spot. So while the Bulls figure out their identity, Bazulis is one of those quiet sleeper candidates who could easily outperform his draft position. Now, this next player, this is someone who I have been waiting to talk about. I feel like when I try to talk about him to my friends, it's often just kind of brushed off to the side as if I'm just like a crazy Heat fan or something like that, which I kind of am a crazy Heat fan. But Kel'el Ware is definitely one of the most exciting players to watch this season. He really came into the scene last year after showing flashes of the immense talent he had in the preseason, but he was still left on the far end of the bench. And of course, there was injuries and the inevitable trade of Jimmy Butler, but this opened up the door for him to start landing meaningful minutes throughout the season. And once he got that chance, you could see the potential right away that Ware has every single tool to become something special in this league as he develops. He has the length, mobility, and soft touch that's rare for someone his size. Miami even experimented with the front court pairing of Bam and Ware, and that where Ware played the more traditional center role, and it looked surprisingly good in a lot of stretches. What makes Ware so intriguing is that he's not only just a rim protector, he can step out and knock down the 3 ball as well. And with consistent minutes, he's capable of putting up double-digit rebounds almost every single night. Now, the one concern with his fantasy outlook isn't about talent, it's about opportunity. The Heat's roster construction right now isn't exactly ideal for spacing or pretty much for scoring at all, period. With Tyler Hero expected to miss at least the first couple months of the season due to that ankle injury he sustained, Miami doesn't really have a consistent shooting threat to stretch defenses out at all. So it's going to be a little hard for them to get easy buckets in the paint. And with an unreliable 3-point shot, Ware's first couple months of the season is going to look a little rough. This is going to lead to a lot of crowded paint, which is going to limit his rebounding and scoring efficiency early in the year. But here's the thing with Ware. He's currently going almost completely undrafted in most fantasy leagues. So if you're in a deeper format or you're looking for a high upside stash, this is the kind of player that you take a chance on late in drafts. Because once Miami does get healthy and Ware's role starts to stabilize throughout the offense, the path is there for him to quietly evolve into a nightly double-double threat, and he's going into a sophomore year with all the upside in the world. And if he does click, you'd be glad you pulled the trigger before anyone else noticed. And this is going to be the last sleeper pick, and it's going to be the rookie Con Noble in Charlotte. The Charlotte Hornets are one of those teams that's honestly have been a true anomaly over the last couple of years since they got LaMelo Ball. They have so much talent, so much promise, but it doesn't translate to wins at all. Noble is shaping up to be the team's best 3-point specialist, and he's only a rookie. And the preseason has made that crystal clear. The coaching staff has given him the green light to shoot whatever he sees whenever he's open, and he has not hesitated at all throughout the preseason. You can tell that they trust his stroke every possession he's spacing the floor, relocating and looking confident in that catch and shoot role. Now, here's the thing with Con. With a healthy Miles Bridges, a healthy LaMelo Ball, that's going to be hard to actually get this year, and Brandon Miller, he's not going to be the focal point of the offense, and that's just flat out what it's going to be. There are only so many touches to go around in Charlotte, so I wouldn't expect him to average more than about 8 to 9 points per game this year, and that's kind of stretching it with how prolific those first 3 are going to be. But what matters is how he gets those points. He is going to be the guy that they turn to when they need to stretch defenses or shift momentum with a big shot. If he stays consistent from deep and keeps playing within the flow of the offense, that role will naturally start to grow as his confidence builds throughout the season. He may start the season as a small role player, but don't be surprised if by mid-year that Constantinople becomes one of the most reliable long-range shooters in Hornets rotation. And it's a sneaky fantasy pickup for anyone needing threes. And now we get into the spicy conversations. And honestly, every year you're going to have the breakout players. Last year was Amont Thompson, who went from about middle of the pack, like 6th round, all the way up to this year being a 2nd round draft pick based on his performance all throughout last year. And this year, these 5 players are players who I think are going to have amazing breakout seasons this year. And first up, we have Alex Sarr. The Washington Wizards are projected to be one of the worst teams in the NBA this season, and that should be a surprise to no one. But when you look a little bit closer at the roster, yes, some of them are aging, but there's actually more potential here than people are starting to realize. And how far that potential goes will depend almost entirely on the shoulders of Alex Sarr. Washington is stacked with young players who can develop into solid contributors, but Sarr is the one who can truly change the team's ceiling. If he lives up to him being the number 2 overall pick, the Wizards could shock some people and sneak their way into at least the play-in competition. I don't think they'll really be a good playoff team, but if Alex Sarr does become what I think he can become this year, then maybe they could shock some people. Last year, Sarr averaged only about 13 points and 6.5 rebounds per game, which are solid numbers for a rookie learning on the fly. But this season, Washington is going to need a lot more from him. To even flirt with a successful year, Sarr will probably need to bump those averages up to around 18 points and 8 boards a night. And that's a big jump, but it's realistic when you consider how much more of the offense will start to run through him starting this year. The Wizards front office clearly wants to build around him as their franchise cornerstone, and he's got the tools for it. He has a smooth mid-range jumper, he has length to finish at the rim, and defensive instincts that already are starting to stand out. The next step is just straight out consistency. Can he handle being the focal point of every scouting report? Can he be the anchor of both ends of the floor for a full 82? If the answer is yes, then we're talking about a genuine breakout season for Alex. And for my next breakout star, we're going to swing it back to the Chicago Bulls, and this one is going to be Josh Giddey. Josh is honestly one of the best stat stuffers in the NBA. He has been since he played for OKC, and last year in Chicago, it got off to a little bit of a rough start, a little up, a little down. He started off slow. He struggled with efficiency early, and he looked a little bit out of rhythm and also adjusting to a new offense, a new coach, a new team, new culture. But once he settled into the Chicago Bulls, he absolutely caught fire. In March and April, Giddey averaged 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 8.5 assists per game, basically flirting with a triple-double almost every single night he stepped onto the court. I believe that last season's stretch is a huge sign of what's to come for Josh Giddey. His combination of size, court vision, and rebounding instinct makes him one of the most complete guards in fantasy basketball. Now that he's in Chicago, he's stepping into a leadership role on a young Bulls team that has talent but hasn't quite figured out how to close out games. He's the type of player who can impact every single fantasy category without needing to dominate in scoring. You can expect strong assist numbers, near double-digit rebounds from the guard spot, and enough scoring to keep him relevant across every single format in fantasy basketball. In points leagues, I have Giddey finishing as a top 30 fantasy player this year, and in category leagues, he's that classic Swiss Army knife and do-it-all guy. He fills almost every single box score, so he can fit in any strategy that you want to play. Next up, we have Walker Kessler, the big guy out in Utah, and he already has established himself as one of the best rebounders in the NBA. And I don't think that's up for debate anymore at this point. Last season, he averaged 12 rebounds per game, while logging more minutes than he did in his first 2 seasons in the league, and that increased workload really showed in his consistency and presence on the floor throughout the season. What makes Kessler so valuable for both the Jazz and for fantasy basketball is his elite combination of rebounding, rim protection, and most importantly, efficiency. He's already among the top shot blockers in the league, averaging about 2 blocks per game last season, and those are numbers that can single-handedly swing fantasy matchups. Now, if we're talking about a true breakout this year for Kessler, The next step would be him moving into the elite center tier. That means bumping his averages up just a bit from 11 points and 12 rebounds that he had last year to something closer around 17 points or 18 points to 13 boards a night. That's not unrealistic, especially with the Jazz team developing the young core around him and giving him more touches in the paint every night. For Utah, so much of their success this season depends on keeping Kessler healthy and continuing to get the same level of efficiency from him while increasing his shots per game. When he's active and locked in, the Jazz defense completely changes. He alters shots, cleans the glass, and gives them the second chance opportunities that keep them competitive in very tight games. So whether you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective or just from a fan of good basketball, Walker Kessler is a player whose steady progression could quietly push him into the all-star caliber territory around this year. Now, this is one player who I struggled to put him on this list. I sat there and I was really thinking there's no logical way I can put this man on a breakout list, considering what he did last year before he unfortunately got hurt, and just knowing where he got drafted even as a rookie. And that's going to be Victor Wembanyama, the unicorn. At this point, I think it's almost impossible to say the word breakout with Wemby because he's already one of the league's elite players. In just his second NBA season, he put up absurd numbers: 24 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, nearly 4 blocks, and 2 steals per game. The kind of stat line that looks made up, like I'm playing 2K, and somehow it still feels like he hasn't reached his ceiling quite yet. Year 3 is where we could really see Wemby take the next step into true MVP level dominance. The realistic progression for me looks like around 28 points, 13 boards, and 6 assists per game, while maintaining his elite defensive impact, which honestly I don't see that changing at any point, and these numbers sound a bit wild, but it's perfectly achievable given his growth curve and how the San Antonio Spurs are building around him. The biggest change this season will be how the Spurs deploy him. Last year, the offense is still finding its rhythm, experimenting with lineups, and adjusting to Wemby's versatility. Now with De'Aaron Fox, who they got at the trade deadline, everything becomes more structured and a lot more dangerous. Fox's speed, playmaking, and ability to collapse defenses will create easy looks for Wemby all night long. Expect more pick and rolls, more lobs, and way more open jumpers for Wemby throughout the season. Offensively, this pairing could unlock the best version of both players, a fast-paced, high-efficiency attack that finally gives San Antonio some real firepower. Defensively, honestly, nothing changes. Wemby remains the anchor of the team. His timing and instincts make him one of the best rim protectors in basketball, and having Fox push the pace will let him focus even more on controlling the paint instead of carrying the entire scoring load like he was in Sacramento. From a fantasy perspective, he's already being drafted 2nd or 3rd overall in most leagues. But if he takes even a small step forward, just a slight bump in usage or shooting efficiency, Wemby could easily finish this year as #1 overall fantasy player. The last person on this list has to be arguably one of the most frustrating players in fantasy basketball. And it's not frustrating because he sucks or that he's just too good. He has just been handicapped on one of the most inefficient scoring teams in the NBA, and that would be Michael Porter Jr. For years, he was stuck behind 2 generational scorers in Denver, Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, which made it nearly impossible for him to really find true consistency on the offense. You'd have nights where he looked almost unstoppable, hitting every single thing from deep, pulling down rebounds, and dropping 25 points per night. And then you'd get those quiet games where he barely even cracks 10 points. That lack of rhythm wasn't about him being untalented. It was all about the opportunity that presented itself in Denver. When you're the 3rd option behind the best player of this new NBA generation, it's hard to get the touches you need to produce consistently. But this year, that's all about to change. Now MPJ finds himself in Brooklyn, stepping into a completely new role. And this time, he's going to be the guy on the team. Alongside Cam Thomas, it's shaping to be truly a 1A and a 1B type of situation in Brooklyn. And MPJ will finally get the green light to let it fly without worrying about taking shots away from a superstar. Last season, Porter averaged around 18 points and 7 boards a game, which is solid considering the role he had in Denver. But now that he's going to have more volume and more freedom to shoot, I can easily see that scoring average jumping from about 18 to like 22 to 23 points per game this year. I don't expect his rebound numbers to change too much. Maybe he stays around that 7 per night mark, but the key area to watch will be his efficiency. Porter has always been an elite shooter, both in terms of form and touch. If he can raise his field goal percentage even a little to around 52 to 53%, the scoring numbers become not only achievable, but highly sustainable. With a combination of size, shot making, and spacing ability, MPJ has the potential to finally become the kind of fantasy asset people have been waiting for since his breakout flashes in Denver. So if you've been burned by Porter before, I get it, you're hesitant, you don't want to spend the draft pick on him, but this season might finally be different. A new team, a bigger role, and a system built around his scoring strengths could be exactly what he needs to turn those flashes into consistency this year, and to finally live up to the hype of being Michael Porter Jr. And that is going to wrap up today's video. We just went through some of my favorite breakout and sleeper picks for this year, players who could really shake up the whole fantasy landscape if things click their way. Let me know down in the comment section who your favorite sleeper is heading into the year, or which players you think I'm way too high on. I love hearing other perspectives when it comes to fantasy basketball. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and check back here every Monday and Friday for more fantasy hoops talks. Thanks for hanging out in the corner. I'll catch you in the next one.